And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns, the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday. Well, it's not Friday for you, it's Friday for me. So I suppose happy Thursday, as it turns out. And I get so confused when I've got to leave later in the week. If you've forgotten, and if you weren't listening to the morning show, tomorrow, I, along with Ken and Joey, will be attending the state GOP Central Committee meeting in Douglas. In fact, we're putting on the evening entertainment for tomorrow, and all I'll tell you is that it's going to be entertaining for some, and it may not be all that entertaining for others. But you know, we're all about accountability, we're all about facts and data, and I see no reason why we shouldn't deliver on both of those. So we're going to be providing everything tomorrow, and then just doing the sound for the meeting on Saturday. So there won't be a morning show or Cowboy State Politics tomorrow. And so we'll bring you all the updates as they happen. Of course, I'll have an edition of Weekend Update posted Saturday morning, so you can hear what happened, what went on, and should be pretty entertaining as far as I'm concerned. On today's program, we've got to do a little catch up from where we were yesterday. There was a story I didn't get to until the latter end of the program about Kamala Harris. Now, most stories now are about Kamala, but this one in particular, and I'm going to get to more of this in the course of the program, but there is a big reason why the Democrats are keeping us all in the dark about Kamala Harris as much as they can. You know, Kamala Harris has a long history of saying stupid stuff when she's anywhere in the vicinity of a microphone. So all of that stuff is public. But there are some very significant plans that the Democrats and Kamala Harris have in store for the rest of the country that they're not telling anybody about. And the reason why is we would all run for the hills faster than some of us are already going if we knew what Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats have planned for the country. It is my belief that we are at a very pivotal election for our country. Now, we say that every 4 years, but this time I think it's true. Just think of where we went 4 years ago to where we are today. We have the highest amount of inflation this country has, well, I shouldn't say it's ever seen because the inflation rate has changed, but we've never before been at over 120% spending versus our GDP. We've never been in that place before, which, by the way, guys, that is the telltale moment when in most countries where the poop hits the oscillating unit. That's it, man. It literally means you are broke. Now, macroeconomics don't work very differently from microeconomics. How the country is run really is pretty much the same as how you have to run your own household. So if you are completely maxed out, if your spending is 120% of what your income is, do you think that there's Any company that's going to give you a credit card, baby, it'll be COD, cash on demand. You pay up front for everything. There is no more credit. And that's exactly what happens with larger countries. When your spending eclipses the amount of money that you bring in, you are effectively broke. You become a debtor nation, when I was in school, that used to be the pejorative that was used for a lot of third world countries. Now, they're not really a country. They're a debtor nation, which means that everybody else pays for them. They are they're the parasite on the rest of the world. Well, consider what we're doing, spending way more money than we're bringing in. We're borrowing more money than ever before. And so we kind of fit that definition of a debtor nation, a parasite on the rest of the world. Now, the only difference between the United States and the rest of all of those other third world countries that I mentioned before is that we have a gigantic economy. And so the theory of the socialists is that because we have a gigantic economy and because we can print our own money, which just so happens to be the world's reserve currency, then we'll be fine. That we don't have to worry about it. That Keynesian economics will work eventually, and then that we were right all along. Now, of course, this is the thinking of the central planners, the people that believe in socialism, that believe in deficit spending, that believe in crazy ideas like economic stimulus. Milton Friedman these are the folks that say that Milton Friedman was wrong, that von Mises was wrong, that Friedrich Hayek was wrong about capitalism, that capitalism is an evil enterprise and that it never really worked from the very beginning. The socialists in our government, Kamala Harris being one of them, they truly believe that stuff. And so when you hear people talk about how evil capitalism is, or they try to convince you that capitalism is something that it is not, well, that is a pretty good indication that they have some plans in store for you that none of us are really going to like at all. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. And it comes from one of the usual suspects, Joe Scarborough on PMS NBC's Morning Joe. He's now trying to convince you that capitalism and Kamala Harris are synonymous. Well, there's a couple of problems with that because when you believe in a command and control economy, when you believe in this global green economy agenda, that is the furthest thing from capitalism. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. I've got some historical audio from Friedrich Hayek. And Hayek, of course, was the author of Road to Serfdom. It was he and Keynes, where Keynesian economics come from. It was he and Keynes that debated socialism versus capitalism way back in the early part of the 20th century. In the 1920s and 30s and 40s, those two went on and did a lot of public debates about capitalism and socialism, or what they would later call socialism. But anyway, it's a fascinating topic, at least it is to me. But now, since the left and the Democrat Party are just coming out and saying it, well, we may as well understand what the heck they're talking about. But let's begin with that article that I didn't quite get to flesh out yesterday on the broadcast. And it comes from The Blaze. It's entitled, "Harris Has Kept Voters in the Dark About Her Plans for America. Democrats Say Her Secrecy is a Good Thing." Now, I know we went over the first couple paragraphs of this yesterday, but let's just get a little, a reboot of it, a little review, as it were. And I quote, "Kamala Harris has been less than forthcoming about what she would do if elected president. Democrats and her boosters in the liberal media apparently believe that when it comes to cluing Americans in on what exactly they might be voting for, less is more, and have now said so publicly. They are out in the open about what they're planning to do to you, or at least the beginning stages of it. They are out in the open saying that you don't need to know what they have planned. We, the folks that are in charge, the intelligentsia, the elites in your government, we can decide for you, and you don't need to know about it." Continuing, Although it has been several weeks since President Joe Biden was unceremoniously retired from the race, his replacement's campaign website remains devoid of any policy agenda. Rather than detail about what Harris stands for, the site merely notes where she has stood, adding only, quote, she will make sure the doors of opportunity are wide open for all to follow. Now, that doesn't mean anything. It's political babble. It's nothing more than a platitude. It doesn't mean anything, much less just about everything else that Kamala Harris says.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Now, we make a lot of fun of Joe Biden, but really what Kamala Harris says and what Joe Biden say are no different.
Sure, it didn't last up under pressure.
Exactly right. One of them, you can't understand what he's saying. And the other one, what she's saying doesn't mean anything. It has no basis in reality because there's nothing specific to it. It is nothing more than platitudes. Take a listen to this montage. I haven't played this one for a while on the program.
So during Women's History Month, we celebrate and we honor the women who made history throughout history, who saw what could be unburdened by what had been. The prices had gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources.
Okay, blah, 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 blah. None of that means anything. And there are only two possibilities with Kamala Harris. The first one is that she is as clueless as the day is long, and she doesn't have any idea what she's saying. Or B, she knows exactly what she has planned, and she thinks that this bullcrap that's flowing out of her mouth, this verbal vomit, the verbal diarrhea, is going to convince the entire country to vote for her, because we did that very thing with Barack Obama. There's lots of history to say that Americans will vote for things that don't mean anything, because we did it twice in a row with Barack Obama. Hope and change. Change has come to America. You remember that soundbite? But none of that meant anything. Hope and change is meaningless. It leaves everything open so that he do whatever he wants. Now, the only thing that was really telling is when Michelle Obama was out saying, Barack knows what we're going to have to do. And I'll look for that soundbite during the break so I can play it for you. But that was about the only thing that had any meaning coming out of that election. Or when he was talking to Joe the plumber, and he said, I believe when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. It was only those few minor slip-ups where Americans got a real vision of what Barack Obama had planned for us. And so the Democrats now have had some experience in not creating any of those gaffes, not saying the quiet part out loud, not telling Americans exactly what they're planning, and instead they're keeping it all under wraps. Back to the article. Quote, while the Harris campaign has highlighted the vice president's record effectively belongs to a candidate that no longer exists. Now, remember, she's flip-flopped on just about everything that she stood for in the past. After all, the New York Post noted that Harris has reversed her stances on healthcare, energy issues, and in recent weeks has gone so far as to reimagine herself as tough on the border, abandoning her pledge to decriminalize illegal border crossings. It is difficult to discern amid her many flip-flops what she still stands for, apart from expanding abortion access, adopting President Donald Trump's policy of eliminating federal income taxes on tips, giving $25,000 of taxpayer-funded handouts to first-time homeowners, and slapping Americans with various new taxes, including a tax on unrealized gains. Now, what an unrealized capital gain is something that you should know about in Wyoming, because it's being perpetrated on you right now in the form of property taxes. Whatever you paid for your home, for example, my parents paid around $50,000 for their home back in the 80s. Well, it now appraises around $300,000, and they have to pay taxes on that $300,000. That's a capital gain that they never have and are never going to experience. They're never going to be able to see any profit from the $50,000 to the $300,000. It is going to be an unrealized gain, but nonetheless, they have to pay taxes on it. Michigan Representative Dan Kildee recently let the cat out of the bag, intimating to CNN that policy is irrelevant and that the election is ultimately just a personality contest. Quote, I don't think there's a real strong reason for her to try and weed out any points of view. I actually think the way the American people think about this choice is less about the minutia of policy and more about the direction of the country, number one, and secondly, about the person. Character, it does matter, according to Kildee. If it turns on character, the election is over. And that's what people are looking for, added Kildee. So policy doesn't matter. Plans don't matter. The only thing that matters in this election, according to the Democrats and Dan Kildee, is the person. It's just a personality contest. And if we make Kamala Harris more personable, and if we make her more likable, though I don't know how you would pull that off, the election will be over. Now, there are a lot of reasons why they're keeping all of this stuff under wraps. It's because if the American public knew what the Democrats and Kamala Harris had planned, well, they would definitely not vote for her. And they're hoping that that doesn't happen. And I'll explain more after the break.
Tossed a bit about 7 toes. From to it would be long on it. It would be long like with me. Sing it.
You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program.
I remember I was 8 years old with a tape waiting on the radio. Come on now, play back in black. I wanna be on repeat. Remember, and I'm all sitting right. That's with the Christie. She took me down to the Paradise City, then Crystal Creek. Guitar crashing dust. Back into the beats, the bass drum. Still something I don't have show in the second row, which you got on his shoulder. Still something I'm ready to go. When the lights go down, the crowd cheers down, go down, sweet song, you think it's all.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy state politics microphone. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. An incredible record, my friends, and I do it simply by telling the truth. That's all you got to do, my friends. And if you tell the truth, people will listen. Fascinating concept, I know. Well, let's get back to the news. And yesterday we had another school shooting. I'm surprised the liberal mainstream media is not trumpeting it from every rooftop, but apparently we did. The interesting thing about this is the FBI knew about this guy. A year ahead of time from the Daily Wire. The FBI received tips about the Georgia high school shooter last year. And I quote, the FBI admitted on Wednesday night that they had received tips last year about the suspect who shot up the Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia on Wednesday, but said they did not have probable cause to make an arrest. Authorities arrested the 14-year-old male suspect after 4 were killed and 9 others were wounded during the shooting. The FBI's Atlanta field office said in a statement that in May of 2023, quote, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center received several anonymous tips about online threats to commit a school shooting at an unidentified location and time. The online threats contained photographs of guns, the statement said. Within 24 hours, the FBI determined the online post originated in Georgia, and the FBI's Atlanta field office referred the information to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office for action. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office located a possible suspect, a 13-year-old male, and interviewed him and his father, the statement continued. The father stated he had hunting guns in the house, but the subject did not have unsupervised access to them. The subject denied making the threats online. Jackson County alerted local schools and continued monitoring of the subject. The FBI said there was, quote, no probable cause for arrest and that no additional law enforcement action needed to be taken by local, state, or federal authorities. The FBI added in a follow-up to their statement that, quote, to confirm, the subject referred to as the 13-year-old is the same subject in custody related to today's shooting at the Appalachia High School. My friends, we have to do a better job. We can't look at incidents like this in retrospect and say, well, we could have done this, we should have done that. We have to take action. Now, I'm not saying we should arrest people without probable cause. We absolutely shouldn't. But if you knew this kid was a threat and you knew that he was threatening to do stuff and you know that there were people that he had talked to, there's a pretty good indication that something is going to happen. Now, you can't incarcerate somebody for without probable cause, but what you can do is watch them. It's called investigations. It's called looking into the subject. Now, granted, a year is a really long time, and certainly you're not going to be able to keep tabs on somebody for an entire year. But now we know that the FBI said there was no action needed by local, state, county, federal authorities, none whatsoever. And the result is the guy followed through on his threats. Maybe we should take these people at their word. Maybe we should continue to do our investigating. Obviously, the kid had mental problems. And so maybe those people that are involved, the school, the parents, whatever, should do whatever they can, should have done whatever they could to get involved in this kid's life and find out exactly what's going on. Maybe his community should have taken personal responsibility and got this kid the help that he needed. Had they done that, the shooting probably wouldn't have happened, and those 4 people would not be dead. But now, because we are looking back and saying, oh, no, there was nothing going on there, we looked into it. Oops, turns out it was the same guy. So, again, law enforcement had this guy on their radar, and nothing happened with him. From the Daily Caller. The Biden administration has revived an oldie but a goodie. Yeah, we're back to Russia collusion, my friends. Russia. And yesterday, the Department of Justice and the Attorney General of the United States held a press conference in which they said that they were actively monitoring a concerted, coordinated plot by the Russians to influence the election. According to the Democrats, the Russians are always trying to influence the election. That's something they never stop doing, guys. Of course, malactors like Russia, China, you name it. Absolutely, they have a preferred candidate, and it's definitely not Donald Trump. From the Daily Caller, and I quote, President Joe Biden's administration launched new accusations of election interference at Russia 9 weeks before the 2024 election. The Department of Justice alleged Wednesday that Russian President Vladimir Putin, tell me if any of this sounds familiar, ordered several Russian companies to target Americans through the use of influencers and social media pages to spread propaganda and interfere with the election in a campaign called Doppelganger. As a result of the indictment, the DOJ is charging 2 Russian-based employees of Russia Today, a Russian state-controlled media outlet, with, quote, conspiring to commit money laundering and to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Some internet domains discussed in this indictment, according to the DOJ, were used to try to influence American voters and push Russian propaganda to lower international support for Ukraine and sow discord. And this apparently is the number one priority of the Department of Justice. Online interference in our election, which, by the way, the entire world can use the internet. And so whatever Russia does, I don't necessarily think that it's something that the United States ought to be looking into. Maybe keeping tabs on it, whatever. But it's certainly not the number one priority. What could be a larger priority is all of the people that the Biden-Harris administration let into the country through the southern border, people who are on the terrorist watch list, who are convicted terrorists. Maybe we should keep an eye on those people. Perhaps they could be the biggest threat. But these accusations come 2 months before the presidential election and days after Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg admitted that he regretted censoring social media posts at the behest of the Biden administration around the 2020 election and the COVID-19 pandemic. The Wednesday news made its way to CNN before the indictment became public, which left social media users drawing parallels to the 2016 election. In 2016, CNN was among the outlets that extensively covered the conspiracy theory pushed by Democrats that Russia and the Trump campaign were colluding with Russia. And it goes on and on. It's just the Democrats pulling the same old play out of the playbook and trying to use it again. I mean, it worked in the last election. Why wouldn't it work in this one? Duh, guys. Well, let's take another quick break before we jump into this Joe Scarborough thing, where he's talking about Kamala Harris and capitalism. It's absolutely hilarious, and we'll get to it after the break. It's spring in the Cowboy State, or as Albert Summers likes to say, spring-ish. Time to get the motorcycle out of the garage, time to go up the mountain, time to get outside and tromp around. And when you're doing that, you still want to make sure that you take care of your feet. The best way that you can do that is order a pair of Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. I know, your mama always told you that wool socks are only to be worn during the winter. But times have changed, my friends. The Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will not only keep your feet nice and toasty warm, they'll keep them cool and dry in the summer. Trust me, these are the most incredible socks that you're ever going to put on your feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You're definitely not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
Let's get through. I just start pushing my dead off. Well, it's for you.
Watch out. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand from every corner of the Cowboy state to every state in the country. Cowboy State Politics on the Independence Network, and I'm your host, David Iverson. Back to the program, my friends. Welcome back. Of course, it's Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live, and it's going to be the last program for the week. At least the last live program. I've got to go down to Douglas tomorrow morning for the GOP State Central Committee meeting. I'll still meet you up on the podcast on Saturday morning. I'm not exactly sure how long of an episode that'll be, but at least I'll be able to give you some updates. Maybe have some sound from our little presentation that we're going to give at the banquet. Should be a boatload of fun. So before the break, I was telling you that we're going to get into this whole Joe Scarborough thinks that Kamala Harris is in favor of capitalism. And it's a fascinating story because what the left is trying to do is redefine the words that all of us have come to know. And the left is really, really good at it. They are experts at manipulating language. And now they've kind of set their sights on capitalism. Most people, they intuitively know what capitalism is because generally speaking, they experience it every day. But to be able to define what capitalism is sometimes is kind of out of reach of people's grasp because it's kind of a nebulous concept. So, too, is the idea of socialism. A lot of people know that that word has negative connotations to it, but if they were asked to explain what socialism is, they probably wouldn't be able to do that either. Now, when Barack Obama was first running for election, his wife, Michelle Obama, pretty much said the quiet words out loud. And I told you that I would find this soundbite, but this is the one that I was referring to. Listen to this.
And Barack knows that we are going to have to make sacrifices. We are going to have to change our conversation. We're going to have to change our traditions and history. We're going to have to move into a different place as a nation to provide the kind of people that we all work desperately.
We're going to have to change our history, our conversations. We're going to have to move to a different place. Well, what the heck does that mean? Why do we have to change our history? Well, the logical answer to that would be because history does not align with their plans. That whatever it is that they have planned for us, and we found out, by the way, whatever it is that they have planned doesn't jive with history. In fact, history disproves the very things that they're talking about. And and we're still in that process, right? The Democrats every day are still trying to change the meaning of words to convince you of things that aren't true. And one of those words that they're focusing on right now is capitalism. I believe this is the Daily Caller. But it's an article entitled Morning Joe is Not Kidding. If you believe in American capitalism, Kamala is the way to go. So what part of the Biden-Harris administration has anything to do with capitalism? None of it. Capitalism is simple: free and open markets, the ability for the government or the ability of the individual to conduct business in his own, however he wants to conduct business. That the government should stay out of the marketplace and let the rule of supply and demand work itself out. That when people have ideas for new products, those products end up, and if they're of higher quality, they rise to the top of the market. They become more popular, and the person that produced them make more money. Those products that are of crappier quality, well, people don't want those anymore. It is supply and demand, and the same holds true for our money supply. That if that, if there is new capital created, by the way, the only way that you can create investment in America or in Wyoming or in your own community is if you produce something new. That is the only thing that produces new capital, is a new product, a new service, something else that other people want to pay for. That's the only way that new capital is created, how new investment is created. And investment does not mean the government taking your tax dollars and giving it to some big, huge firm that ends up pocketing the money. That's not investment. That's cronyism. That's graft. Investment is private capital being put towards a good idea to produce a new product or service. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and everybody involved in their administration are only interested in a command and control economy. That they, the intelligentsia, the elites, the people in their ivory towers, they are the ones that possess all of the knowledge required to, run the economy. They alone know the answers to all of this. And so we should just listen to them. All of us down here in Normalville, we should just be equal. Each according to his need, each according to his ability. That we should all be equal. We are all the same, and we should all have the same outcome. That's what this ridiculous idea of equity is. You've heard that term thrown around all over the place. I've seen it in school curricula here in Wyoming. I've seen it in videos all over the place. People are talking about equity. Equity and equality are two different things. Equity means equality of outcomes. That is, it is a financial term. Equity means the same on a financial basis, which is why you're seeing the Biden administration trying to take your money and give it to people who aren't paying off their college loans to make them equal. Well, as it was written in George Orwell's Animal Farm, it's just sometimes some pigs are more equal than others. And that's exactly how socialism will work. Well, Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe, he came out and he said, well, Kamala Harris is all about capitalism. Let's just take a listen to what he said.
Well, this argument that was made yesterday by an economic reporter, don't worry about the insurrection, worry instead about tax code and regulations. It really, that underlines a point that I made in the show before that I'm going to make again. If you're a capitalist, if you believe in American capitalism, as I believe in American capitalism, unapologetically believe in American capitalism, and it has lifted more people out of poverty than any other economic system ever. It has its problems. The sharp edges always need to be rounded off where it.
Okay, all right. So before he said the sharp edges need to be rounded off, he's right that capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty worldwide than any other possible system. Socialism, which he is a supporter of, has been and is responsible for the deaths of tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people across the globe. Any country that has enacted any sort of socialism has, in the end, killed people off. And I mean, it's absolutely true in the history of socialism. And, even before the term actually happened, I mean, this has been a constant battle in government. Those people who want to command and control economy, that think that they know better than the people living their lives as to how to operate them, they in the end end up having to force people into socialism, which means they end up killing them. Now, here's the next part of Joe Scarborough's comment where he really goes off the rails.
It doesn't get in the way of competition and free markets. But if you believe in American capitalism, you should be worried about Donald Trump being elected. We understand democracy. We understand democracy, Madisonian democracy under threat, because Madisonian democracy is under threat. But American capitalism also under threat, because I will tell you, I grew up a conservative. I know you didn't, but what we conservatives believe.
Okay, if you don't know, Joe Scarborough is not a conservative, nor has he ever been. He is one of the very definitions of redcoat. He was a Republican congressman for far too long. I think he only served like one term or two, but that was way too long. But he's not a conservative. He's not a capitalist. He has been and always is a socialist.
Is and less government. less power concentrated at the imperial presidency, less power concentrated in Washington, D.C. You have Donald Trump saying, I'm going to take all the power into my office. I'm going to control the Fed. I'm going to control the FCC. I'm going to control the Justice Department. I'm going to control everything that I can control within the Oval Office. That is the antithesis of Madisonian democracy. That is the antithesis.
Okay, all right. I've had enough of Joe Scarborough. The argument that Trump is making is that the Biden administration has been involved in consolidating vast amounts of power into the Oval Office. The Fed, they are printing money hand over fist. That's the only way that they're being able to finance everything that they're doing. The massive money printing and not allowing the free market to ebb and flow, to rise or fall on its own. And so when Joe Scarborough says, well, Donald Trump is going to take control of the Fed, really what Donald Trump is going to do is turn off the spigot, stop spending, stop printing money. FCC. Okay, so Donald Trump says we are done playing favorites with the media. We are done influencing social media. We are done having the government involved in free speech. Now, if that is what Joe Scarborough thinks as the imperial presidency, I mean, he's absolutely off of his rocker. The Biden administration signed over 100 executive orders on day one. Over 100. I think the number was like 117 or 107. I know the number 7 was in there somewhere, but a tremendous amount of executive orders that consolidated power in the Oval Office. Now, the next thing he mentions is the Department of Justice. Well, the Department of Justice is absolutely out of their mind. They have been prosecuting Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the most prosecuted man in American history. They have been using and wielding the Justice Department to go after their political opponents, namely Donald Trump and his entire family. That, my friends, must come to an end. I mean, it's not a matter of it being Donald Trump taking control of the Justice Department. It's setting it back on a course that is straight, back on a course of independence, away from politics. Yeah, is Donald Trump going to fire a whole bunch of people when he gets into office? Heck yeah, and he absolutely should. But it's not a matter of that being an imperial presidency. It's setting the economy and the country free of those governmental constraints that were created by the Biden and Harris administration. It's those two. And I know it sounds like a back and forth, but just think about it logically. Have you ever heard of a Democrat that is really in favor of capitalism, of of smaller government, of less government involvement, of smaller amounts of government spending? Have you ever heard a Democrat talk like that? No, because they don't, because it is the antithesis of their ethos. That the Democrat Party, they firmly do believe in bigger government, more spending, more taxation, more government involvement, a command and control economy, because they believe that they are the people that possess all of the answers to solve all of the problems. See, one of the main arguments that Friedrich Hayek makes in The Road to Serfdom is that liberals, that is, people like Joe Scarborough, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, David Axelrod, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, all of those people believe that they are in possession of all the facts, and because they think that they are in possession of all the facts, that they can control everything. But the truth is, it is impossible to control everything, which is why the only way that socialism can continue on is if it is forced, that you end up executing the people that disagree with you, which is why socialism usually ends up with the deaths of millions and millions of people, either directly or indirectly as a result of government actions. In Venezuela, it's both of them. People are starving to death and Maduro is killing people. In the Soviet Union, you had both of it. In fact, they're still killing people. In Mao's China and the Chi-Coms, they killed probably 100 million people. The truth is, my friends, that anytime socialism has been tried, it has resulted in the deaths of tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of people. And anytime you hear a Democrat talk about capitalism, you need to stop in your tracks and ask them to define exactly what capitalism is and make them give the argument to you. Explain what it is that they're talking about. What exactly do you mean by capitalism? What exactly do you mean by these free markets? Because your actions certainly don't count towards what you say. And that, my friends, is the the ultimate lesson of today's program. Don't pay attention to what they say, pay attention to what they do. That's the only way that we're going to get any truth out of the matter. Well, my friends, we burned up another busy broadcast day. I've got to run and get stuff for the lovely Christine. Have a good weekend. We'll talk again Saturday on the podcast. From the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.